My name is Brian Hazzard. I'm CEO and co-founder of Randori. As context, I've been in cyber for about 25 years. I spent 13 of those years at Carbon Black as a product executive helping build that company. Following Carbon Black, I just founded a company called Randori. Our mission at Randori is to help our customers quantify risk. The way we're doing that is we're building an attack platform that's going to look at their environment the same way an attacker is going to look at their environment. And then we're going to put that back in the hands of the defenders so that they can actually see what their environment looks like from that lens of an attacker. Today we're going to talk about becoming a protected enterprise. There's three areas that we're going to spend the time. First is around the big trends in IT and the pressures they're creating on security and the things that we can do to get in front of those. Second area is around managing risk, and particular focusing in on how to work with the business to understand where you have to place your bets and what is acceptable risk. And the last area is around prioritizing investments. Before doing that, I just want to briefly introduce the team. Joey, Steve, thank you for joining us. And so with that as context, let's just get after it. Joey, if you would, please introduce yourself to the audience. I know you had an earlier panel. Just a brief introduction and how you think about becoming a protected enterprise in the context of premise health.
Yeah, sure. So I'm still Joey Johnson. I even have a favorite seat now. So yeah, obviously, you guys heard me talk about premise health earlier. I think that for us, though, the uniqueness that I think I have, the opportunity that I think I have is I've been with the organization for 10 years. I've watched us grow through a lot of mergers and acquisitions. And I'm privileged enough to have a CEO who really supports the security mission and sees it as integral to our growth and our strategy end to end. So that's allowed me to participate really deeply with our president, our growth strategy officer, all the different teams to sit there and say, hey, I have a security perspective, but also a business leader perspective as to what we're doing. I think it's funny when we look at our innovative strategy and how we're trying to move forward and how we try to be protected. One of the things that I've always shared with my leadership is we need to leverage security as a business differentiator, but also as a business enabler, right? When you think about automotive, when you think about race cars, there's not a race car in the world that doesn't have brakes on it. And all that does is enable that car to go at the top speed that it possibly can, but still with the right amount of weight and the right amount of controls to allow that race car to win the race. If you lock it down too much, it will not cause any accidents. It also will never win a race. So, we have to have that context when we look out at it and make sure that the business is aligned. And as Anthony was saying, make sure that we're strategically placing our bets in the right place. But at the same time, when I sit in that room with our chief innovation officer, our growth officer, and we talk about failing fast, failing fast means something very differently to me. It could mean we just failed and it happened really fast and that escalated quickly. So you got to choose your battles a little bit. But I think the most important thing to me in developing a protected enterprise is really just ensuring that you have business alignment, that you understand where the business is going and you're able to meet them there and have them become champions of that mission. You're not going to solve everything with technology.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Fridakis. My job is to secure storytelling. I secure the New Jersey Mafia, dragons, and girls looking for sex in New York. So, sometimes when you talk about security and the kind of things that we face every day, I feel like, despite my 55 years, that I haven't been born. Because we have to keep up with technologies and innovations that were not made to be secure to start with. And we find ourselves with a toolkit that is not truly made for them. And I'll give you an example. I had to learn about drones. Some of our dragons are drones. And some of people that come and visit us where we shoot some of the shows that hopefully you enjoy use drones to take pictures and post them and steal from us the opportunity to tell you what's happening. So I had to find ways to secure access from rogue drones without affecting the drones that are our dragons. I had to find ways to, when we moved to a new building in New York, I had to find ways to secure IoT devices that are now being used to book conference rooms that are now IP-based, and they have access to my Office 365 calendar. I was not taught in school a long time ago how to deal with IoTs, and I had to not only validate the vendors that claim that, oh, problem solved, just pay us something. I had to deal with artificial intelligence attacks, and everybody loves to use essentially what I distilled down to patterns. And the guy's telling me about machine learning, but what he's really trying to sell me is pattern matching. And he's using, yet another uncomfortable buzzword. So my challenge, keeping the enterprise protected and secure, is bridging the gap to new technology that is coming upon me not by choice, but by most of the times partnership or by third party. And I have to be effective the same way that I was years back with a much smaller arsenal of technologies that I was reasonably good at. I still love this job, though.
And so it'd be interesting to hear, recognizing how fast the technology is moving. IoT, we talked a lot today. We heard about ML and AI, drone technology. What are the technologies that, Joey, that you're most concerned of in the context of premise that's creating the most pressures on the security program?
I'm going to change my answer from what I thought it was going to be, because until 5 minutes ago, I'd never conceptualized of actually having to protect a dragon. That's great. To me, I think that as I look out to where we're headed, all I know is this: whatever technology that we have today is going to pale in comparison to what we have tomorrow, and it's going to change and morph in different ways than we ever contemplated. One of the things that I see as sort of the biggest challenge as we look out to that is, kind of regardless of what your business context is, we have landed in a place where there's just as much user-generated data as there is what we used to call corporate-owned data, right? And the lines are getting really blurry between what that is. Where we used to talk about, rogue technology or things that your workforce was using, now they don't even need to bother. They can completely work in an isolated fashion outside of any technology that you provision to them, but they're doing it with what you would rightfully think is kind of your data, and we see IP leak like that all the time. So for me, the biggest challenge as we look forward is kind of having to be able to navigate that, understanding the right time to bring in what technology that we're going to bring in, knowing that, I think to your great point, a lot of times it's not built to be secure out of the gate, and it was never designed with that intention, and so we have to kind of figure out how do we strike that balance between what that emergent tech is, where it's relevant to our business, and where we're going to take that, and then that is kind of juxtaposed by the fact that we've got emergent technology and emergent regulatory requirements that are oftentimes conflicting, that are requiring us to make certain assertions and certain capabilities around technology and protection of it, but without really understanding how it works. So like a great example that we ran into recently was when we start talking about the right to be forgotten, and there's organizations using biometric-based authentications, we've had workforce members or other people come back and say, hey, that biometric-based authentication actually represents my digital ID, and I request that be kind of struck now that I'm not working with you. And the organization would say, well, that's also part of our core logging and authentication environment, and we have regulatory mandates to protect that and retain it for a certain period of time. So there's lots of new stuff coming out like that I think is just challenging, for sure.
I think to some degree we don't need to even have this conversation, because when look every one of these folks here in the eyes, we say, what do you pretend you really don't know? How many of us are using so much money to have MDMs on our mobile phones, but we have very little on our mobile laptops? And how much more data the laptops can fit than the smartphone? But what I'm really scared is the smartphone, because we have neglected to realize that it does have the same access, remote access into our applications, especially as our applications are now migrating to the cloud, than the laptop. So that's my first issue. The second issue I have is the notion that most of the things that I have that could compromise my organization or cause embarrassment are actually housed in third-party servers that I have very little, other than probably some contractual provisions, control over. So, you cannot make a movie by yourself. We rely on hundreds of third parties to do something as rudimentary as, say, access control to people that have badges, to as complex as, say, a CDN so you can enjoy a movie. So what we worried is about where the most important thing is today and how do we assign value to that thing today. Value is a very fluid thing with us, so I think, because I happen to know the questions, we'll get the opportunity to talk a little bit about this. So mobile phones, mobile devices, and the notion of knowing where the most important thing is. I say I'm going to avoid using, discovery buzzwords, but the idea is being able to find the content or the value or where that thing happens to be, especially when you realize so much of that is in third-party servers.
And that makes me think about what Anthony was saying earlier is exactly right. So having spent so much time doing defense and now moving to the offensive side, you realize the asymmetry in that battle, right? Where the attacker needs to succeed once, the defender needs to succeed every time. If you define success as you're going to just stop everything, you'll just never get there. So I'd be very interested in the team sharing the perspectives on how do you think about risk and how do you work across the business units to help understand what is acceptable risk for the business.
So what I like to tease you with is this notion of context. What do you have to lose today? Now, don't think of it as in terms of today, tomorrow. Think of it in terms of hours or even minutes, and here is why. So hopefully all of you are watching a certain show that we're very proud of these days, and it airs at 9 o'clock on Sunday. Now, I tell you what, do you know how much effort and money we spend so that you won't have this at 8:59? You cannot believe. But I'll tell you another thing. At 9:45, I'll be happy to send it to you. So this is how context-based security works. At 9:45, I really don't care. I care about Europe because they're the next ones. They're at 3 a.m. So the same way, when we have something, a report, a program, something that we keep to ourselves and we say how much security we're going to place around, that's how we think of risk. Risk is a multidimensional thing. From one perspective, we say, this is the context of risk today. This is the embarrassment, the loss, the lawsuits, the commercial issues that's going to cause us. Therefore, we're going to put security to that. That's how context-based security works. I didn't say perimeter. I didn't say firewalls. I didn't say anything. I say context. Knowing where it is and knowing what's worth to us so that we can place all kinds of different security controls to it. But now here's the fun part. That is multidimensional, and there is a time dimension to it. Today, I'm going to put all I got. 9:45, you can have it for free. That's how context-based security works, and that is the dimension of risk that we apply to what we do every day. By the way, this is not only in entertainment. This is, I bet you, and I challenge you to think of it along the lines of your own business. And it is not just about files. It's about the life of a laptop. It's about what we do with an employee who happens to know a lot of things today because he was in a certain meeting, and tomorrow we really don't care, so we're not going to monitor his activities in the same passion as we're going to do today.
Yeah, I think that's some great points. I definitely think contextual relevance is pretty much everything in determining kind of your risk appetite as an organization. I think, it's funny when we sit, I think, in security conversations because topics always sort of center around risk and what are we going to do to control the risk and what are we going to do to manage the risk. And a lot of times I think security folks get lost in the fact that when you pivot and you're looking at your CFO or you're looking at your other key business stakeholders, I mean, in a capitalist society, we're in business because it's about taking on risk. That is the entire thing that we are doing. Otherwise, everyone would be a billionaire. So risk is going to happen. It's going to be present, right? It's about knowing, to your point, I think the context of when is the right time to protect something and what is the right mechanism in which you want to protect that thing, and can the business tolerate loss at a certain level? A lot of times you can. I mean, I would not be the first one to say if you protect your diamonds with equal vigor as your toothbrushes, you're going to save more toothbrushes and lose more diamonds, and that's not really what you want to do. But yeah, I couldn't agree more, right? Because what's a diamond today is not necessarily a diamond tomorrow, and I think when we look at how we're building a program and structuring that, it can tend to be very monolithic and sort of arcane in the way that it's been rolled out, and it's not able to flex fast enough to kind of understand the changing dynamics. I mean, a lot of organizations are going to grow by mergers and acquisition activity, right? The information that's really critical to that M&A transaction before transaction really doesn't have the same relevance afterwards. So all of that is really, really valuable information.
I think it'd be super helpful to hear. One of the things I've noticed when talking to CISOs over the years is often we know what we want to do, but getting institutional commitment to getting the work done that needs to be done is incredibly difficult. It'd be interesting to hear your perspectives and strategies to get the buy-in necessary to drive those projects forward once you've identified that risk and you want to kick off the project.
I found the last 4 years that mentioning of other breaches of similar, we used to say between ourselves, please don't tell that to anyone. Thank God for Sony, because because that's how we got some tremendous increases in budget. But it's not a joke, and I don't mean to make fun of it by any stretch. But it happens. And if you are one of the few lucky ones that you think that's not going to happen to you, I think you're fooling yourself. It will happen. So the most important thing, if I was to go to a new company, I would say, do we have an instant response plan, truly, and we have exercised it? That's like action number one, before anything. Because that is the one fallback that we have once things happen. And if we say, oh, but, we're secure, we have this, that, the other, we have the latest technology. It actually will happen from a vector that you cannot even imagine. Mm-hmm. So therefore, I don't play the fear tactic, and I only have to refer to the reputational loss and the potential loss because of commercial agreements and other, if something does happen. And we are very practical and very pragmatic about the resources that we apply to the known assets that we have there at risk.
Yeah, I think one of the speakers earlier today said, if you're going to give me some medicine, can you give me some sugar with it, right? And I think that when we talk about how we're going to protect our enterprise, like I said, I'm a very strong proponent and believer that is not something a security officer function can do on its own in a silo. You need the business buy-in. And the other thing is that a lot of times with what we're doing from the security side, we're not generating our own demand. Right? The business wants to do something. They want to introduce a new line of business. They want to pursue something new. They want to do something different. And so, getting engaged with whoever that stakeholder is or group of stakeholders and saying, hey, let me meet you where you are. Where do you want to go? Here's the best way we can put guardrails on this and let you go off and do whatever you want to do. Because, we don't want to lock it down. And I find that when it becomes, if there is a situation where I'm sitting in a room with a stakeholder and I'm talking at them, that's almost never going to be successful. When the conversation is shifted to where they are looking back and asking me questions and asking how we're engaging, then we're really getting somewhere.
Well, Joey, Steve, I'd like to thank you for your time and appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.